Good morning. This is Daniel Okinawa. I wish to do a little bit of a teaching on healing of the land, how our land needs to be healed. I want to start out with a quote from Black Elk Speaks. To whom so great a vision was given in my youth, now as an old man the nation's hoop is broken and scattered. There is no center any longer, and the sacred tree is dead. It may be that some little root of the sacred tree still lives, and that my people may go back to the sacred hoop of our cultural identity and find the good red road and the shielding tree which blossoms. And so, healing of the land. Why do we need to have the healing of the land? Well, first of all, there was a violation of protocol gatekeepers' authority by Western settlers when they came over to take over. They did not come to integrate or to understand our culture. They came with manifest destiny. It was given to us by God to take over your culture and to basically come in and bring our culture, our Western assimilation. They used the philosophy of eugenics to show that we were savages. We were not real human beings. In fact, there was a trial to determine whether we were human or not at one point. Also, they signed treaties to gain access to our land, but then they violated these treaties with lies. Then they proceeded to have racial cleansing, genocide, and federal assimilation through boarding schools. They forced children with gunboats to go into these boarding schools. They removed them from the families. They removed the culture, their language, their regalia, even their relationships with brother, sister, and mother and father, so that they could westernize them. The goal was kill the Indian and save the child. But then they put them in pedophile rings, forced castrations, smallpox blankets, TB wards. Many were killed outright for protesting this procedure. And the boarding schools became something that brought a curse to the land, as well as the violation of the treaties and violation of gatekeeper protocol. Then there was the murder of native leaders under the flag of truce. The most famous one was that produced the Mothman Curse, where a chief and his son was slaughtered in a fort under the flag of truce in the Ohio Valley. Then it proceeded into massacres, Wounded Knee that we're familiar with, and Sand Creek Massacre. These were unarmed, basically, First Nations people that were slaughtered with Gatling guns. Then they came in, and if there was a woman that was still alive who was pregnant, they'd cut open her womb and kill the baby. All sorts of evil things that were done. The land became cursed as a result of this. Then the raping of resources for material gain, the gold from the Black Hills and also from the koala boundary of the Cherokee, so that they wanted the gold, so we're going to remove you from the land so we can get the gold, because they were people who wanted to acquire. It was part of the Canaanite curse of acquiring, having control over manipulation and wars. Then pollution of the environment came in through the large cities and factories. The land became cursed again. Our life support system basically became destroyed. Then there was a destruction and disregard of our native cultures and spirituality. We were taught that our drums and flutes were satanic and that we had to worship in cathedrals. In my tribe, they burnt the churches that we already had established before the missionaries came and said, we wanted to honor the elders up front, but in cathedrals you had to sit in front of an elder. No one wanted to do that. Then there was the imprisonment of indigenous people on prison camp reserves all over the country. So we're still in these prison camps, reservations they call them. And so we have two choices. One is to live in the bitterness of multi-generational grief, suicide, addiction, and poverty, and loss of cultural restoration. We can choose that, or we can choose to work toward healing and reconciliation and forgiveness, and to rebuild our great culture, and to restore our tribal vision given by the Creator, and heal our land. An example of this was in Canada. I've been a part of the forgiveness movement in Canada. The Prime Minister repented in tears for what was done to First Nations people there in Canada in the boarding schools. And there was a sincere apology where he admitted we were wrong. Natives didn't want the money. They wanted to hear that what was done was wrong. And so he invited Indigenous people to come and have a summit and to try to have reconciliation. Friends of mine went to all the tribes in Canada and got them to sign a covenant. And I have one adopted for America that I've tried to, through different presidents, have instated here. But in Canada, 2 years after the Prime Minister repented, there was in Ottawa a gathering, Native American gathering, where there was the signing of that covenant. I have a copy of that covenant with a golden eagle feather. And after that covenant was signed, the stream that hadn't had salmon in it for years started filling up with salmon. The land started getting healed. The land started producing again. For the Winter Olympics, they protocoled and honored Indigenous people. And as a result, Canada won more gold medals during that Olympics. So they began to have healing of the land there in Canada, but not here in the U.S. And so what I would like to do is to read a version that I've modified from the Canadian version. And if you would like to have a copy of this, simply email me at agapedan1@AOL.com. And here is the United Covenant for First Nations people. We First Nations of America confess that we have lived in a state of multi-generational bitterness, hatred, mistrust of our white brothers because of our past history, which includes forced removal from our lands, genocide, racial cleansing, forced Western assimilation and abusive boarding schools, and broken treaties and covenants. Because of this, we as Indigenous Native Americans have assumed a racial inferiority and have given up our high values and ancient cultural ways to become a part of the manifest destiny of a melting pot amalgamation of European immigrants whose current value is political correctness. We as American First Nations people admit that we have failed by giving up our assigned mission given by the Creator to be gatekeepers of this land with the ability to give blessing and honor and protocol. We have failed to pass on our positive cultural values and deep spirituality to the next generation of young people, and that's a crime. Therefore, because we have failed to respond to our past persecutions by maintaining our calling, which was given to us by Creator, and have instead reacted negatively by medicating the pain through alcohol, drugs, suicide, and poverty, we do freely admit our failures against our purposes and cultural mandates. We now agree to begin walking the path of reconciliation and healing by humbly admitting these failures, both past and present. We also freely confess the failures of our forefathers. We admit that our once intimate relationship with Creator has become too casual, and that reconciliation with Him through His Son, the Peacemaker, is our first priority. We freely admit that we have substituted sacred cultural worship through drum and flute and dance with our priority on materialistic competitions and public tourist spectacles, which has lost our focus and broken our sacred covenant with the Creator. We have believed the lie that our regalia, traditional native values, and sacred indigenous native instruments of worship were evil and of the devil and needed to be burned. This has left our youth without cultural roots and structure, and we've allowed many to wander away from the tribal family. We agree that as Native Americans, in accordance with the teachings of the Creator's Son, that we need to forgive our enemies who have tried to destroy us and our culture. We agree to take personal responsibility for our personal failures, including the ways we have reacted, which has not demonstrated Creator's heart of love and forgiveness, needed to heal our hearts and cultural soul. We agree to begin reconnecting with our assigned mission as First Nations people. We believe that our land once again will be healed through forgiveness and sacred worship. We admit that because of our neglect, we have allowed other forms of spiritual darkness from other cultures to be integrated with our sacred spirituality, which is contrary to the teachings of the medicine wheel. I have just a little bit more of this here. And whereas we as First People of America and Turtle Island are unique and distinct nations and have been made in the image of the Creator, Yohewa, We do believe that he is the sovereign authority over heaven and earth and has placed upon all nations a sacred trust to be stewards and keepers of his creation, and that as sovereign nations we are united with our sacred relationship with Grandfather Creator and with one another. And whereas we as First Peoples have been given gatekeeper assignment over our original sacred tribal lands and deserve Creator-given honor and protocol, and permission granting, which extends a blessing and protection to those who humbly enter through protocol of honor and respect, those who bypass this protocol by force and arrogance will experience a curse upon the peoples and their lands. We are a covenant-keeping people and value honesty, and so on. And so there's one more article. Let me just read the end of it. Therefore, we the undersigned do agree to restore our ancient past and calling given by the Creator by releasing forgiveness of our abusers, both past and present. We also confess our failures by reacting in bitterness as a culture through following the Western ways of medicating the pain through addiction and poverty. We agree to rebuild on the positive things in our cultural heritage and to restore our spirit and native values. We confess the lie that our assumed identity is as inferior people. We commit ourselves to the restoration of our native values and our worth as First Peoples through deep spiritual connection with the Great Spirit and Grandfather Creator. Aho. So if you would like a copy of this covenant, I believe it really defines what is needed to heal the land. And in Canada, they have a beginning of healing the land, and I would like to see that take place here on Turtle Island in America. So let's work together to restore our culture and heal our land. Aho.